things, let's jump in to Elden Ring. I hope you're doing well, by the way. So, Elden Ring, I'm sure you're familiar. If you're familiar with sort of the video game zeitgeist, as it is, should I like tap on stuff? I'm currently sitting on the ground in my closet, hoping to get some better audio quality in here. So we'll see what the background noise is like when I check out the audio at the end of this. But it means I got a lot of like little cloth, clothes, stuff like that I can rub on or play with. And then there's like shoes. See, I got this leather. Fake leather, I think. This doesn't look like real leather. Can't afford real leather. But I can like tap on some shoes. Let's see, there's a canvas sneaker here. See if I can get some nice canvas sounds. Anyway, maybe I'll just kind of play with things as I'm talking. But anyway, if you're familiar with video games at all, then you've probably heard of Elden Ring. It is the newest release from Software, which is a video game development company. I think they are based out of Japan. The creative director or creative lead, I don't know the specific, name of his role or whatever, is Hidetaka Miyazaki, who is a pretty well thought of creative in the video game world, at least by people like me who love the games that he has created. From Software has released games like King's Field. I think the first King's Field came out in maybe 1990, late 90s, I believe. I want to say 97, but I don't think that's entirely accurate. It is like a 3D RPG type game, heavily focused on combat and exploration. They released a few King's Fields, I guess, would be the plural. And then I think they did like Shadow Tower. But my understanding, unless I'm, unaware of a big game that they had a hand in, their first big game was Demon's Souls. And they kind of parlayed that success into a whole franchise of games that are kind of collectively called the Soulsborne series, because it consists of Demon's Souls, Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3, and Bloodborne. And then they also made a game called, why am I blanking on it? Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice. So it's making the whole Soulsborne thing a bit more difficult to, people call them Soulsborne games, but, you gotta find a way to incorporate Sekiro and now Elden Ring into there, right? Elden, Soulsborne, Shadows Die Twice, whatever. Anyway, they make really great games. The games are kind of famous for being, difficult. There's a whole, discourse around, FromSoft games that they've really generated this kind of discourse, which is interesting. And I think, wherever you fall on how you think about the difficulty of these games games and how you think about how people talk about them and how people talk about the difficulty and all those types of questions. The frequency of that conversation is kind of a testament to the appeal of these games and their creative uniqueness. You know, people, if like Battlefield 2042 was a really difficult game and it felt inaccessible to people who couldn't clear a certain like difficulty threshold, nobody would really care because the game sucks. No offense to anybody who likes Battlefield 2042. I mean, I haven't even played it, so I'm just jumping on a bandwagon 100%, but the gameplay that I've watched, listen, it looks fun in that kind of way, where if you're with a couple of friends, it can be fun to play a really buggy game. But putting all that aside, FromSoft games are notorious for their difficulty. When I think of them, I do think of that, but I primarily think of their world building and their atmosphere, because they have an atmosphere that is unlike really any other kind of modern game series, in my opinion. The creatives over there are just masters at taking a... Sorry, just had to make sure I had my phone with me and make sure it was on silent so it didn't start ringing. The thought suddenly occurred to me. They are masters at creating these settings that are just dripping with atmosphere, and they feel like they are saturated with history and reality. You know, the verisimilitude of these game worlds is extremely well done. And what's really impressive is they do it through such a small amount of writing. The only kind of text that you get in these games is from NPCs who talk, you know, compared to some other games, very little, and are not particularly branching conversations. You just kind of get through their one, like, stream of dialogue, and then can check in with them later to see if they have a new, you know, stream of dialogue to give you. So very different from something like Skyrim or Fallout. You know, these, not to pick on Bethesda, it's not a bad thing, but like a Bethesda game where there are different topics that you choose from and you give certain responses and things like that. There's a tiny bit of that stuff in Elden Ring in particular, compared to the others, but very, very minimal. And then the other text is from item descriptions. So if you find a sword and you look at it in your inventory, there will be a couple sentences of text describing the sword and giving a little bit of history about it. So it'll say something like, you know, this sword was used by the demigod executioners who sharpened these blades to be strong enough to cut through, you know, divine flesh or whatever, like the description is. And then from that, you know, little bit of lore there, you can start to kind of piece together what is going on in the world, but it's really up to you how much you engage with that. So that's a really cool aspect of their games, and even if you engage with it very little, the design of the world gives you a sense of how much is going on, and how much has gone on, and how much story is there, if you were just to look for it. So even if you don't really look for it, you still get to, in my opinion, it's a very enjoyable experience to know that all that stuff is there. I'm gonna grab this little tablet, tap on this a little bit. they create and their wonderful world building. And so Elden Ring is the newest release from Software, and they really fired on all cylinders here. I think the game is a triumph of theirs. It was kind of marketed as like the Dark Souls open world, you know. They're finally going into an open world format, jumping on that cultural, you know, bandwagon. And it worked quite well. So I love the game. I think it's incredible. It has been such an amazing experience playing through it, and has been unlike any game I've played recently. The last game that kind of hit me as hard was Outer Wilds. And I've played other good games since then, but, you know, in terms of how much the story grips you and the game grips you and pulls you in and you know, just makes you feel like, I don't know, brings back that like childlike feeling of wonder and exploration. The game was really successful in doing that. And so I adore it. That being said, I do have criticisms. So, you know, I'll get into some of those. But more than anything else, I just loved the game. So I'll start by talking about some of the things that I loved. This is a totally unstructured spiel. I don't have any like notes here or anything, so just kind of ramble about thoughts as they come to me. So let's see. Okay, starting with this. It was so much fun coming into a brand new FromSoft world. The world was created by Hidetaka Miyazaki in collaboration with George R.R. Martin, who wrote the Song of Ice and Fire books, Game of Thrones, which I've actually started reading for the first time. I never watched the show or read the books, but I can't remember what sparked the urge. I think it was there's a friend of mine that I think recommended I get on the books finally, and you know, I've known that, you know, heard how good they are and blah blah blah. But anyway, I finally got the first book, started reading it. I'm like 300 pages in or something. It's pretty good. I quite enjoy it. So it was kind of funny. I was consuming two George R.R. Martin stories at once. So anyway, it was so much fun to jump into this new mysterious world and explore it with the community. And going back to the like mystery of the worlds, right? Reading item descriptions, piecing together the lore. I have two brothers that also got the game when it came out. So I had a group chat with my two brothers that like 90% of our text messages in it were about Elden Ring as we were playing, and it would be talking about things that we discovered in this great big open world, right? Talking about things that we found, comparing notes, you know, exchanging theories on like, you know, how certain things happened in the history of the game, what certain characters, you know, are really about, what their desires are, and then also comparing notes on like what paths our characters were going down. We all went for different endings of the game, so it was kind of fun because we all had a different opinion on how the game, or you know, all of our characters were doing something different. So we would kind of joke around with each other that we'd all have to invade each other's worlds and you know, fight to see whose philosophy came out on top. That's another thing of the FromSoft games, if you're unaware, is they have a pretty unique multiplayer system involving invading other people's worlds and trying to sabotage them, basically. So going through that process of discovery and conversation that communal aspect was so much fun and elevated the experience tremendously from what it would have been if I had been going through it alone, which still would have been, great, but there's that other level there when you're doing it as part of a sort of community that just elevates the experience tremendously. So, highly recommend that if you check the game out or play it, you engage in that side of it if possible. Got a book here. I'll tap on this book now. So that was awesome. Let's see what else. What else to talk about? The aesthetics and scenery, the design of the game, right? The visuals, the sounds, the voice acting. Oh my god, the voice acting was so good. All of that stuff was really great. And there were moments in the game that were just as impressive as, going to Anor Londo for the first time in Dark Souls 1. Or, seeing any of the sort of incredible vistas that FromSoft loves to make. Going up into the Undead Burg for the first time and navigating through those streets and battlements, or the famous Miyazaki swamps. All those really memorable locations. Elden Ring had some, came to bat swinging with its design in those regards. What else did I like? The characters. I loved the characters. They were all super well written. There was like one or two storylines that I felt ended a little unsatisfactorily, in an unsatisfying way. A couple characters that I was interested in didn't have endings that I thought, had a great, was a particularly good bow on their storyline. But that was definitely the exception to the rule, and for the most part, all the NPC quest lines were super enjoyable. I'm playing through New Game Plus right now, and in my first playthrough I didn't want to look anything up, just kind of wanted to go through blind, and just find what I could find and miss what I missed, and so now I am going through, flipping some pages in this book. See if you can hear that. So now that I'm going to New Game Plus, I'm kind of going back through and seeing what I missed. And of course, FromSoft is so, they're totally okay with you missing things. They make some things really obscure, difficult to find, easy to miss. So I missed a couple of quest lines and such. So it'll be fun to go through again and hit those now and experience them. And their open world design is pretty great. I think the open world games of today could learn quite a bit, like the Ubisoft model, of these big icon-laden maps. And I don't want to listen. The Ubisoft open world has been much maligned, and for good reason. But there are different modes that video games can operate in, right? Different purposes they can serve. And it's sort of like, I don't know, if you're going to a movie for something that is just kind of entertainment fluff, it's not going to be a particularly daring storyline or narrative. It's not going to make you think differently. It's not going to challenge your preconceptions about the world or people or whatever. It's just something that's going to entertain you. That's fine. I don't have a problem with fluff. I think that people should be introspective and should universe and your place in it, and what it means to influence the world and to not be around for the ripples of your actions. And I could talk about Outer Wilds forever. So I'm not trying to say that you have to go to performance art pieces where people are. You don't have to go to things that are like torturous. Like for instance, Ari Aster, if you know him, his movies like Midsummer and Hereditary. I think they're good movies. I think they're well done, well made, but I hate them. I hate watching them. They are like torturous to me. And so I'm not saying that you have to put yourself through painful art for it to be like a good experience. But what I am saying is that there may be a place for the Ubisoft model of open world for people that want a nice, easy thing that they can slip into after a hard day at work and just knock off a couple of side quests while they're hanging out. But it has dominated the open world industry, that style. So I think the more uncaring approach of FromSoft that says, we don't care if you find what we put in the game. If you find it, you find it, and if you don't, you don't. And that makes it a lot more special when you do find things, as opposed to the Ubisoft approach, which is going to give you icons and quest markers and blah 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 to make sure that you see everything the developers put in. So I think that's a sort of lesson that can be learned from Elden Ring. I've got my hands up by the mic. I'll do some hand sounds. Yeah, I guess those are a lot of things I enjoyed. What else did I enjoy? As usual, the combat, the mechanics of the game were super fun. It's a tried and true system. It works really well. The rolling, it's a funky system in a lot of ways, with weird exploits and cheese strategies and all this stuff. But that's kind of what makes it fun. It's a bit janky in that way that feels handcrafted, right? I like a little bit of that jank. So, but it's been refined, with every game. And this game in particular, they did a couple major changes. Like they added a dedicated jump button, so that jumping is a lot easier. And now there are jump attacks that you can do. I relied on those pretty heavily. I played a strength build. I used a giant anchor, like a ship's anchor, for basically the entirety of the game. The first boss that I fought, it was like a gladiator, and I took his big hammer, and I used that hammer for a while until I got the anchor, and then I switched to the anchor, and that saw me through the end of the game. My old trusty and rusty anchor. So I used jump attacks a lot. It seemed to me that the bosses were fainting a lot more. Like they would have attacks with a big wind up, and then they would hold in the wind up for a long time to try to get you to panic roll, right? To try to get you to roll preemptively and then hit you. Lots of really interesting boss maneuvers that sort of kept you on your toes with how you were having to fight them and learn their moves and stuff like that. So I really liked their variety of boss fights and mechanics in that way. It sort of kept you on your toes, kept you thinking with every boss that you fought. Yeah, I'm not a professional critic or reviewer or anything, so I'm maybe not the best person to give real in-depth analyses of the game systems and what makes it work, but it was just an incredible game, design, great characters, amazing voice acting. That intro cutscene is legendary. If you haven't seen it, you should go watch the intro cutscene to Elden Ring. It's this narrator who kind of sets the stage for what's going on. It's got these beautiful still art pieces, which kind of is in contrast to the kind of bombastic animations that FromSoft often opens their games with. I think about like Dark Souls 3 and going through all these really interesting looking bosses and showing them emerging from their coffins and things like that. But this game took a much more visually subtle approach by just having these still painting images while the narrator spoke over them and the music, was playing. And I loved it. It made it really kind of mysterious. It made it sort of storybook in that way, where it left you with a lot of questions. It left you wanting to know more. And the voice acting is just off the charts. I mean, that person deserves just so much praise for their work there. It was amazing. But let's see if there's anything else I want to cover there. Great enemy design, lots of fun enemies to fight. Yeah, the game is huge. I mean, it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I was, shocked with how big the game got. But I guess I'll jump into a couple criticisms now. Let's see, let's start with, on that note of how big the game is, a lot of the dungeons came in like 3 flavors, basically. There were catacombs, where you go down and you fight little gargoyles and skeletons and stuff. Kind of navigate through these maze-like catacombs, trying to find a way to the boss fight. They came in the form of like mine shafts, where you go down a big elevator and walk through some mines, then find a boss at the big circular arena at the end of it. And they came in the form of little villages, which are hardly dungeons, but they were like ruined buildings, and you walk around and you find a little path underground that leads to the boss arena. And then they had some unique ones like forts and things like that, but for the most part, the kind of average dungeons that you were clearing were, caves / mines, little villages, and catacombs. And it got a little repetitive in that way. I think even in that format, they did do some pretty good work at keeping things varied. So, some of the catacombs, like, there's one over by Lanedell, the royal capital, where you have to, it's like teleporter traps. You walk into the catacomb and you open up a treasure chest and it teleports you somewhere else in the catacomb. And then there's just these little teleporters all over the place. And it just became like this hellscape of trying to find your way through. I beat the boss, but I could not find my way out. After like 20 minutes of trying to find my way out, I ended up just using the item that lets you teleport back to the last site of grace that you rested at, and you lose all of your runes, but like, yeah, whatever. I had to get out of there. So they do some work like that to keep things varied. And there's another one where like, I think it's called the War Dead Catacombs, maybe. It's over by that big beach in Caelid where a certain boss fight occurs. That place is pretty cool. You walk in and there's just all these, and I guess spoilers at this point. I mean, I'll probably spoil some stuff. Just minor things, but maybe at the end I'll talk about the endings a little bit. Probably not, but we'll see. That like War Dead Catacomb was full of all these dead spirits Soulsborne game, I don't use the summoning mechanic. I like to go through it on my own. Not that I judge anybody who doesn't do that. Play how you want. But I just kind of like that as a little challenge for myself. So, I didn't use the spirit ashes or anything like that. And I just remember I was getting so exhausted because those were like the only rewards for doing the catacombs. Basically, every catacomb ended with a boss fight that gave you a new spirit ash. And every time I got one, I would just send a picture of all the spirit ashes in my inventory to my brothers and be like, "Come on, not another one." So, between that and the somewhat repetitive design, that got a little tiresome. I would have liked to see a little more variety in the dungeons that you explored. And I say dungeons in the broad term, right? In the sort of generic RPG term of like a place that you delve into and kind of takes you off the, quote-unquote overworld for a bit. It would have been cool to see some more variety there. And then, let's see, another criticism. So, okay, when you start the game, you start off in a place called Limgrave, and then you can go to the east and go to a place called Caelid, or you can go to the north and go to a place called Liurnia. And I went from Limgrave to Caelid, and it was it was a pretty tough area, really lots of hard fights and boss fights and stuff, but I stuck it out and cleared Caelid. All of its, dungeons and boss fights and things like that, or, at least the ones that I found. But from that point on, the game was basically, that was like the last significant challenge that I had in the game, because I guess it had just leveled me up enough that when I went back to the other areas, the difficulty curve never caught up with me. And so after I beat Caelid, I basically just one-shot my way through like every boss fight in the game up until like the very end. And so I don't know, there's pros and cons to how you do difficulty scaling, because I think something like Oblivion, Elder Scrolls Oblivion, is annoying when it's like you're fighting a boar that's been leveled up to your level and you're just getting wrecked by this little boar. You should feel like you're getting stronger, but also if you do it in a very static way where the things are always just as strong as they are and you get stronger as you go along, then you can have the experience that I had where I overleveled myself by beating a difficult area, and so then all the other areas in the game were, tiddlywinks. So that wasn't like a ruinous experience of the game for me. But, part of the fun of the FromSoft games is hitting these bosses and having to learn how to fight them, learn their mechanics, get better at fighting them, and then eventually beat them. And, once I beat Caelid, I really didn't have to learn bosses at all, because basically every boss that I fought, I just walked in and I clobbered them with my anchor and, moved on. And so that was one thing that I don't know exactly how you fix that, because there's trade-offs whichever way you do it. But that was one thing that did kind of bother me. Let's see, what else? The crafting system. I don't think I crafted a single thing in the entirety of the game. I don't really need to use like pots or whatever and throw pots. And if I ever needed to cure myself of poison or scarlet rot or whatever, where you use the little bolus items, I basically had enough just by scavenging them from around the world. So I never really engaged with the crafting system. Doesn't mean that I have a problem with it being in the game necessarily, but it just felt like kind of dead weight to me. But I'm sure that there's people who engaged with it a you're a ranged fighter, it was a much more useful system. But, yeah, I'm trying to think of other criticisms that could be levied against it that came to mind while I was playing. Nothing's like jumping to mind. Some people have said that it gets too difficult at the end, and I don't know, I was expecting it to be a lot worse. As I was making my way through the game, I was hearing people talk about how much the difficulty spikes at the end, and, like, I mean, it got harder at the end, obviously, the game progresses in difficulty as you go, and Melania is a really tough boss, but it didn't hit as hard as I had heard it was going to, or as I had sort of expected it was going to. With that being said, I really did kind of explore every inch of the world. I don't think I missed very many locations or bosses. I probably missed, like, I would be surprised if I missed more than, like, 5 named locations, little dungeons, because I was super thorough, just vacuuming up all the loot in the world. So perhaps the fact that I had done all of that before getting to the end game meant that I was a little over leveled compared to most people that get to those points. So I could see if you were fighting Melania and she was, you were doing like a smidgen of damage to her. That could be frustrating because she's a pretty tough boss. If you haven't heard of Melania, she's an optional boss in this entirely optional location. In fact, you have to get through like 2 optional locations to even get to her. She's really tough. She has a lifesteal ability, so she heals when she hits you. And she has this crazy AoE attack where she spins her sword all around and dashes towards you 3 times in a row. And that one's really hard to avoid. But, then you go on YouTube and you watch somebody who's like level 1, naked except for a club in their hands, and they go and they fight her without taking a single hit, and you're like, man, it could never be me. But I bludgeoned her into submission with my big rusty anchor, so that anchor was pretty slow. That, I gotta say, my strength build was starting to fall apart in that fight because she is just so fast and my attacks were very, very slow. And I would need to get in and hit her and then avoid her attacks, but I had such a slow wind up with all my swings that was a little tough. Probably not the ideal build to fight her. Would have been better with like a little short sword or something. So I think the game gets really hard at the end, but not, I don't know, it never felt to me more difficult than like Sister Frida from Dark Souls 3, or I don't know, those like twin demon princes or whatever they're called. Those are also from Dark Souls 3. Those guys were pretty hard. I don't know, people talk about like Manus being pretty hard, or the Black Dragon Calamite. There's that guy from the Ring City DLC in that one dragon, like I think is like corrupted. It's been a while since I played that game. Anyway, so it's tough, but it didn't seem particularly difficult compared to sort of what I had come to expect from FromSoft. But again, I think that's probably partially because of how much I had explored the game beforehand. If I sort of rushed through the areas, I bet those bosses would have, really taken a bigger chunk out of me. Souls presented to you visually with like a vista. But I think those moments of like awe-inducing, awesome grandeur and beauty, or not even beauty, but like just truly incredible things, I think that they were generally fewer in Elden Ring than in previous games, and I think that's because in previous games you were put on a track through these locations and you could, go different paths and stuff for certain moments, but at the end of the day, like, you were in Elden Ring, you can see. I feel like I'm definitely not explaining myself well. There are great vistas in Elden Ring, but there are more great vistas in the previous games. In Elden Ring, you can always, like, turn your camera to the Erd tree and get a great shot wherever you are, right? But it's always kind of the Erd tree, and it's either the Erd tree as well as a background of, like, the lakes of Liurnia, or, a background of the Aeonian swamp or whatever, or foreground, I should say. But to go back to Dark Souls 3, when you go down to where the giant guy is, what's his name, down at the profaned capital. Anyway, when you get down to the profaned capital and you see that big ravine and the structure there, and you also get, when you go to the city, it's been so long since I've played Dark Souls 3, I can't remember the names, but when you get out of the catacombs after the boss fight with the skeleton dude in the goblet, you step out onto the cliffside, you see that big gorgeous city in front of you. I just think that there are fewer moments in Elden Ring like that because of the open world nature of it. And so that's maybe one aspect that but Elden Ring is so big also that they do have lots of moments like that. So I don't know, I could go either way on this, but especially because it's been a long time since I've played the previous games, that this may just be nostalgia or something speaking, but I would say it's kind of my impression that in a game like Dark Souls, I had more moments of sort of pound for pound, more moments of stepping into an area and being like, whoa, this is really something different. Whereas in Elden Ring, it's like you get that moment kind of once per region. Every time you go into a new region, you get that moment of like, whoa, this is crazy. But the regions are so big, and there's like, 7 or 8 of them, or however many there are, that you get 7 or 8 big moments of whoa. But in, Dark Souls 3, you get those whoa moments a lot more frequently because they have these, all these different areas. You're being put on the narrative track that's, chugging you, chugga on a train through the game world. I'm getting super rambly and nonsensical, but you get the point. Or maybe you don't, because I'm being nonsensical. So I think my brain needs a little nap. Gotta go to bed. I hope things are going very well for you. I hope that if you played Elden Ring, you enjoyed it. If you haven't,